Hello, Jessica. Please.
Hello. So I am in Eugene, Oregon, and I'm talking to Frank in Frankfurt, Germany. Wish I'd rather be in Frankfurt, Germany. Oh, yes. Perfect. And we'll be going live soon too, so you can talk to us live. So Time to Wine with Jessica Lewis is a live broadcast featuring experts in wine, social media, leadership, and marketing. And each speaker is featured on 5 different social media platforms every other Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The live stream broadcast is featured on LinkedIn Live, which I was just approved for, Facebook Live, and YouTube Live every other Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We are now also going live, so we can do live question and answers. If you would like to ask us any questions, please do after the recording. And also feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so we can keep doing live interviews. Frank Schulz, my friend in Germany, is a high-level director of communications with the German Wine Board with extensive experience in media, print, television, and online media. And so now I'm going to talk to you. We're going to talk a little bit about him and his background and things to see and do in Germany. So Frank, tell us a little bit about your work history.
Yes, thanks a lot for this opportunity, Jessica. I started my career as one unhappy contractual lawyer, believe it or not. And then I noticed that I'm not really too fond of this job I had actually studied for. So luckily, I also simultaneously worked in several side jobs. And that's how I found out that I like editing and PR work and writing and so on. So this was actually my breakthrough came when the web entered the scene as a mass medium. So it was a great chance for me in those days as an editor. And I built up, or I was among the first editors that built up the news department for Europe's largest TV station. So that's how I started the first half of my career. And then after a decade or so, I felt intellectually bored, if you can say so, by typing news every day. And I remembered myself that I actually come from the wine branch on my mother's side. And so I read this vacancy of the German Wine Board or the German Wine Institute, some call it fund, and I spotted immediately what the problem was at that time, some 13 or almost 13 years ago. There was a lot of work to be done in the online and digital business, and that's what I had learned from scratch. So it was a fantastic challenge for me, and it still is. It's as you know, Jessica, the wine industry is so active, and so it constantly has to renew itself. So it's never boring, and I'm still in this business and very happy to push the media awareness forward for wines of Germany as a whole.
And you're known for being, I have a little bit of echo, incredibly innovative with marketing German wines. So let's talk a little bit. Do you want to talk a little bit about the German Wine Board and then go into Generation Riesling?
Yeah, sure. So the German Wine Board, it's a legal thing, kind of. So legal matters are sometimes not too interesting, but I will try to sum it up quickly. Our institute works on the grounds of a federal law. So by means of this federal law, we are allowed to work with a mandatory fee that every individual winemaker contributes us with, and this sums up to a certain budget that we can rely on and plan with on a year-by-year basis. So we use this budget to develop certain campaigns and events, and we foster our online and media channels by this. So it actually has been quite a wise decision that was made by our forefathers to establish a central hub, so to speak. And in many cases, other competitors ask me, how can you do all this? But it's, there is a legal ground for this, and that makes it easier to coordinate things and to rely on certain plannable actions or plannable campaigns. So yes, so the German Wine Fund, or the German Wine Board, as you said, finances the German Wine Institute, and the German Wine Institute is, well, another term for Wines of Germany as a whole. So Wines of Germany headquarter, we coordinate all the work in 15, at the moment, we develop campaigns in 15 foreign markets, and we also coordinate the campaigns domestically. And one of this very successful campaign has been the Generation Riesling that was created some 15 years ago in London, in the German House in London, by a handful of young winemakers, and ever since it developed quite nicely, as you probably followed parts of it. So by now there are some 340. The number of members varies. Young decision makers of the German wine scene that are organized in this open platform. It's a platform where all the players, the young players up to the age of 35, get the chance to take part in events, and they get invited to great events in municipal cities around the globe. So it's really a great chance for them. And it has been ever since we established a website for them, generationriesling.de. We also had generationriesling.com, but I think it's down just now. I have to check that later on. Someone told me earlier today. So anyhow, so this ever since we started an online communication around this topic, it really went through the roof, and not only the merchants, the trade industry, but also the journalists liked this idea of spotting new faces, and most of the players in our branch, they're constantly curious about what's up next, or what's the next trend, or who comes up with a new idea in the branch. And so it's like a think tank, more or less, and that's what makes it really fascinating. This movement, it's like a movement.
Well, it's always been so fun to watch and see the different people that you have involved. So you recently did another big campaign that was very successful, called the Clink Different campaign. And would you like to talk about that? And that was worldwide, and talk about how that was marketed and what you did innovatively with Think Different.
Yeah,
Clink Different. Excuse me.
Clink Different, like
Not Think Different. You were thinking different.
It's always good to think different too, to come up with new ideas. But the term, or the name of the campaign is Clink Different, and we do this campaign together with Bordeaux wine. So it's a joint campaign with two European growing regions, and the reason for that is that it is subsidized by the EU, by Europe. So we get European budgets for this. We applied for that. You have to apply for these programs if you're living in Europe. You may and can apply for that. It's easier for an institute like us than for a private person, because the work involved, it's a lot of administrative work involved. So it's I cannot really recommend for an individual to do this, but we were so fortunate to go through this process. My colleague Steffen Schindler worked all through that, and our colleagues in Bordeaux too. So we got the chance to run this 3-year. It's actually it will be 4 years at the end, because we had this a terrible pandemic year in between. But we're back on track.
That.
Well, it has been quite a challenge, of course, for all of us. But we're back on track now, and we're following this campaign, or pursuing in 4 or even 5 states. It's Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, and California. And the goal is always to organize great events at unique locations where both sides of our business get the chance to interact, to meet merchants on the one hand side, wine journalists, and the winemakers themselves, most importantly, of course. So that's always the goal, to team up. And so I think this will have quite a great effect on our respective businesses on both sides, merchants and liquors or wine stores in the US, and winemakers over here and in Bordeaux. So we're actually quite optimistic regarding this ongoing campaign. There's also a website called clinkdifferent.com, and there every consumer can actually take part in there's a, how do you call that, a prize to be won. You can win a
contest?
Trip, a contest, right? You can win a trip to come over to Europe and visit either one or either the Bordeaux region or wine regions in Germany. And so that's one motivation, but not the only motivation to check what Clink Different is all about. And I think the term was selected, or the agency came up with this quite wisely, since we're not the biggest wine nation, but our what Wines of Germany actually stands for is not only, well, Riesling, of course. I mean, we're the biggest producer worldwide, but there's so many other grape varieties to be discovered and explored for each and every dish you can think of. That there's also it's also very versatile, and Clink Different try to refer to that it's worth exploring this world of versatile wines of a high quality level, where you get I think it's the value for money is outstanding. So I think it will be a very successful campaign. We're picking up now again after the first year that was, it's always difficult to get something started. Then we had the problem with the pandemic, and now we really need to try to get back on track.
Well, let's talk a little bit. Speaking of the pandemic, I don't think any of us were predicting a worldwide pandemic.
No, not at all.
And so we're actually, where I am, we're seeing still pretty intense repercussions of all this. But tell me, let's talk about what's going on your side. And I'll tell you, in our side, where we were told that we could take off our mask and we could kind of proceed happily forward. We're back in mask full time. So, and
right.
We're all going back the other way again. So let's talk a little bit about your experience on your side, and I can tell you what's happening on my side.
Well, yes, I would be really interested in that, Jessica, to hear how it's
what we're doing.
Yeah, what you're doing. It's hard to sum that up in one phrase or in one sentence, since it very much depends on the region. Well, if I try to generalize it, since 50 million from out of 80 million people are vaccinated by now, it is a little bit easier than it was only half a year ago, And we do not expect another major lockdown this fall and this winter, which would be terrible for both,
Yeah.
well, for the whole industry worldwide, of course. So I'm quite optimistic, and we are working, in the right direction. There are these restrictions that you mentioned, and I have to wear a mask even if I leave my office. I have to wear a mask, and I do that. And so, for an example, when I go, I meet friends regularly in bars or restaurants. So I do have to wear a mask when I enter the restaurant. But then it is possible, by obeying the specific rules that you probably go by as well, to enjoy a meal and to enjoy some wines in a public location. And this is more or less new to us. We have seen worse times during the past 20 months. So I'm actually more optimistic than I was last fall or last winter. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Do you want to finish?
No. I would actually really like to learn how you deal with this.
Well, what we're doing over here is that we're back in masks. So we wear a mask. They first said you had to wear a mask if you were in an enclosed area. And then if you were outside, I think you didn't have to wear a mask. Now we have to wear masks indoors, outdoors, if we're with groups of people. So that's happening. The repercussions I'm seeing on this side is when we opened back up, there was a restaurant and there were 25 people waiting outside. And this seems to be happening everywhere. And they put a sign on the door and they said, we don't have enough employees to serve you. So they closed the door, and they just turned the customers away. They're everywhere in town. Some of the restaurants, some of these are national chains like Taco Bell, for example, are saying we can't receive the food we need to make our products, so we're closed. It's happening with the supply chain issue with all sorts of retail is very limited right now. And so a lot of the stores look really thin or they don't have the product. Or even online, I tried to order some Birkenstocks and they said they weren't available. And like 4 different pair, they're not available. And then they'll let you know when they are available, or they may never be available. So it's like, okay. So there's just a lot of supply chain issues. There's supply chain issues with food. There's some price gouging going on right now. And so some of the things like restaurants, I think when we were all staying at home cooking, one of the things was you were so used to doing it yourself that going out, and then the prices went up. So going out to dinner and paying $60 when you could buy a week's worth of groceries for $60. There were some nice things. So what would you say some of the silver linings were on your side? There were some nice things that came from this. There were some negative things, and then there were some really wonderful things that I saw on my side. What did you see?
Yes, well, it was and still is a great challenge to deal with this situation as you described. One upside was, and no one really had expected that starting in April, March, late March, April last year, the online wine business was going through the roof, and also the online wine tastings. I do see that the online wine business, the online sales, they would have developed anyhow. Definitely not as quickly as they did due to the pandemic, but I think the tastings, the online wine tastings, I had not expected that they would stay for good. I mean, there's still online wine tastings going on, and it was amazing to see, as you said, as you pointed out yourself, that so many consumers and wine lovers enjoyed their wine at home. They ordered their wines, the wines they like, and they were very open-minded and as you know, wine lovers, or as you expect them to be, and they yes, they purchased their wines online, and then they met, so to speak, virtually. And I underestimated that, even though I've been working online for years and years and years, but I hadn't expected that this would work so nicely. And it actually closed a gap. I mean, there's a huge gap, of course, and I feel really bad for the gastronomy, because the gastronomy is still suffering here as well, and it's suffering severely. But on the other hand side, there was this there were the sales figures rose in this online business, and it made up for some of the losses. So yeah, it's hard to say. Well, the trade, the stationary trade, can you say that, stationary trade? So not the small trade businesses, not the small merchants, but the big businesses.
Okay.
They profited from that, and they're still profiting of that. So the influence, and that's sometimes a downside for the winemakers, when the big merchants, the big warehouses or the wholesale houses, when they profit so greatly, because then their influence is really big.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes difficult for the winemakers or for the wine associations and sellers. When it comes to price negotiations. But this is a very dynamic process, of course. And I must say that the solidarity throughout the whole branch, and also including the trade and the big businesses too, there was a great extent of responsibility that I saw and felt and still feel when it comes to dealing with this pandemic and trying to find creative solutions how to work under these completely new circumstances. So it's not all negative, but well, some learnings are, of course, that the businesses that were quick and innovative and that were prepared for a digital revolution. I mean, it's like a digital revolution, what we have seen through the past 20 months. The Americans are probably quite used to this, because they have always been at the forefront of digital, in the digital industry. But some other states that we work with, they had even more problems. So it's getting better now, Jessica. So I'm my glass is mostly half full and not half empty.
Full? Okay. Trying to do half full? Well, let's talk. So we have about, I think, somewhere around 7 or 8 minutes. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the wonderful things to see and do in Germany? I've been to Hamburg, but there's many other things I'd like to do in Germany. I've just been a little bit kind of stuck here for a while. So
okay, no wonder. But yes, but Hamburg was a great choice to start out with, Jessica. From Hamburg, it's actually not too long to drive east to Berlin by train, and Berlin has a fantastic wine bar scene, and I'm really glad about this, because it has not always been like that. Maybe in the 20s, but ever since, there was a long stretch where we had not have this great wine bar scene, and we do have that in Berlin now. So Hamburg is a good starting point. Berlin is a good starting point. Frankfurt is probably from a wine perspective the best starting point, because when you come in Frankfurt, then most of the wine growing regions, no matter in which direction you drive, are nearby. So this would be. But talking about Hamburg, Bremen is not too far, a smaller city, not too far from Hamburg, and Bremer Ratskeller is a fantastic wine location. There are lots of. We promote these landmarks. We call them landmarks of wine culture and best vineyard sites. We summed those up or put them up on German wines de. So you can research, do some research there. There's also another great website. I could actually, let me see if I can type that in here somewhere. It's called www.germany.travel. That's an affiliated organization, the German National Tourist Board. So both the GNTB as well as the German Wine Institute both summed up these nice spots to see. You may have seen the German wine route. That's very close to my office, only not even an hour, half an hour to an hour southwest from here. So most of it takes place in the southwest. But you know what I can really recommend, Jessica, is to, as you started, to come in one of those major cities, enjoy the cultural life in the city, and then when you want to see more green, visit a wine region, because it's just the perfect match. So I think
I would love it. Now, okay, so the last two things we have here is one, those of us that are big international travelers have all experienced culture shock. Would you like to discuss some of your culture shock situations?
when I travel, or
Well, when you travel, or when you've traveled internationally, or dealing with international people, what kind of culture shock have you experienced? And if you don't know, I have some.
okay, I should let you go on, because I have so many American friends, and I
You don't
normally
have much culture shock anymore. Okay.
I fly back and forth. I mean, there are quite a number of differences. I totally agree, but it's not a shock for me. But I'm curious to learn what you experienced.
What some of my experiences are in Europe. I have some really funny ones. But one of them, I'll just tell you one of my husband's. My husband's Brazilian, so I have culture shock in my own house and with his family. So
That's
I'm
a
about
nice
to
one.
go to Brazil, and none of them they don't speak English. So generally I'm just kind of entertaining myself elsewhere. Or one of them is my husband and his family, they'll talk about what we're doing tomorrow, except they're speaking in Portuguese. So then,
Oh,
so when it's time to go, everyone's looking at me. They haven't told me what we're doing.
that's a
So,
nice one.
so they're like, why aren't you ready?
Yeah.
I missed the conversation. I didn't know we were going anywhere. But my husband went to Korea. And so the businessmen in Korea were serving him a variety of different foods, and they were bringing out live dishes like fish that was live and moving around, and he was like, "Oh,
Interesting. Interesting.
oh goodness,
Well,
I don't eat meat." Every time we went, I think one of my bigger ones in Italy was I was in northern Italy in Bassano del Grappa, and I in where I live, if you're at the airport and you're in the parking lot and you leave, you pay. There's a thing there that you can pay when you leave. So I made the assumption that this worked that way. So I was in an Italian parking lot, and this was a city where there's not a lot of tourism, so it was primarily Italian. And I got in the queue to leave the parking lot, and apparently you had to have a ticket to leave, and the ticket was across
oh,
the street somewhere.
I get it. Yeah.
It was in some unknown place. And so I had to get out of the car in a queue of Italian people and say, scusi,
Excuse me, I have to go all the way back. Yes.
could you all 20 of you
That's a nightmare. Yeah.
so I can get out? And so they did.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, and I was trying to say it in Italian and say, oh gosh, there's a problem.
Right. Oh
And
gosh.
they let me out. But
Yeah.
and then I was running through the train station, and of course I didn't pick up the ticket for the train because the train was about to leave. So you learn that one very quickly when the policeman is on the train and wants €120. So it's like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last thing here that we have that we can talk about, what would you recommend? So all of us went through our own version of a difficult time here, or also there were some nice things that happened about it. But what would you say some of the top tips for successful leaders would be moving forward, or successful business people, entrepreneurs?
Well, seeing, I mean, in general, or seeing this specific
Well,
situation.
just some of the things maybe you've learned on how to move forward
Right, right.
through good and bad.
Yeah. So, well, from my point of view, always remember that the route is the goal, if you can say so. Don't be too impatient with yourself. Um, uh, that's one thing that I learned, that many things, fly to you while you're busy working, and I think you can confirm that yourself, seeing your CV. So. Also, I think it has been, or it is always wise to try and expand the professional network. And there's so many ways to do this. It's from my point of view, it's also important not only to team up with people from your branch, but with neighboring, always correspond with neighboring branches, see, where could be, no matter if they're smaller or bigger, where could be a great business idea no one had thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I well, I try that myself to note every once in a while, after 1 or 2 years, what have I accomplished? What do I plan to do? And so, unfortunately, I don't get around publishing it, but I do note these things. So it helps you. Writing sometimes helps you to get a clear mind. What is really important to you. So those are some pieces of recommendation. Yeah, when it comes to social media, I mean, one of my assets, so to speak, always was to try to make the most out of really tiny budgets. And that's how why the social media, the big topic of social media came up at first, and why it's still so important. So I think if you don't have a great budget, it's important to fascinate your audience with premium contents that you can come up with. It could be a study, it could be a graphic, something. It's important to stay in touch with universities, with other agencies that do research. There's so many hubs you can stay close to, and this as a whole brings the whole topic. It moves the whole topic forward, and it's like an incubator, if you can say so. Like be your own think tank, or try to be a think tank to team up with others who have the same outlook on this, and then you will automatically come up with new perspectives.
And I
Um,
and I what I think one of my tips would be too, and then we'll stop here in just a second, is that if you were to look at my resume, starting with age 20, it looks like I sat there and I used to teach for a long time 19 and 20-year-olds, but it looks like I sat there and I just was the one person that knew exactly, had everything figured out, and I knew exactly what I was doing and exactly where I was going. And what I never knew, I'm strategic about what I do, but there's so many times where you're feeling kind of lost and you just keep going, and then you're going to where you're supposed to be, or you're not quite there yet, but you have to go through this kind of uncomfortable ride and
yes,
then
it
go,
is.
oh, I get it now. So and I would say a lot of that has perseverance, a lot to do with skills. A lot of that has to. I'm kind of known for being. I'm an entrepreneur, but I'm an entrepreneur, but an innovator. And so pioneering ahead, you don't always know where this is going, but you just have to keep kind of chopping the trees and going ahead too. So I think
Yes.
so too. Okay, well, so we're at 35 minutes. So what we'll do is we'll stop here and then we'll plan on doing this live and people can ask questions. So we'll plan on that too. So all right. So
Sounds
in
good.
wrapping up, oh yes, there you go. I need one of those too. You need to get me one of those.
Yes.
All right. So wrapping up, feel free to ask us any questions when this is posted. This will be the live broadcast are posted every other Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. By the time Frank's is posted, I'll be doing it every Friday at 9 a.m. 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And then we're going to start going live in the middle of all of this fun. So the Time to Wine broadcast is featured on LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and Twitter every other Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The live stream broadcast is every other Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And follow our tribe here and blah, blah, blah. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right. Thank you, Frank. Bye in
Thanks a lot,
Germany.
Jessica. Nice speaking to you. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye. I forgot how to say bye in German. Okay.
Auf
Alrighty.
Wiedersehen.